delighted today to be joined by Usman Wahid, who is a partner with KPMG. So thanks for joining, Usman. Today, we're going to be talking about future of working models in a post-pandemic environment and what that actually means for the outsourcing industry. So big open question to start off, Usman. Sure. What are you seeing in terms of from home? Yeah.
Okay, well, look, it's been during the pandemic, we have seen all of the providers who operate from offshore delivery locations having to send their workforce home with their laptops, their desktops and their computer screens to continue to work in a home environment. So it clearly has been going on during the pandemic. Certainly our organization also has relationships with these sorts of providers. And they've been continuing to deliver services, but in a different environment.
Yeah, and do you think that is now going to be a mandate to actually get employees to go back working from offices? And will that be full-time? Will that be part-time? What sort of trends are you seeing there?
Yes, I mean, look, the contractual basis of how outsourcing agreements are put together does require outsourcing providers to deliver the services that they deliver from fixed locations, right? And for their staff to be there as well. And there's good reasons for that. One is, you know, as people are pushed into different jurisdictions, having a service delivery location does create a sort of hub for that business and its ability to employ staff. Secondly, from a data security perspective, having a service delivery location where staff can go into and where you can monitor the controlled environment in which they work is very important for an industry like the outsourcing industry. So, you know, my own experience is that clients, customers have a concern about the data security impacts of, you know, their suppliers' workforce working from home. You know, we haven't heard yet of any major issues that created. But there is that contingent risk. And so I think the pressure is coming from customers to go back to how things were operating. Now, you know, in the UK, we are moving back to a more normal model. I think other countries have had a different experience with COVID-19 and are still in a situation where they may be suffering lockdowns. And in that scenario, then I think, you know, those organizations will need to continue to operate using this model. But I think the pressure will be to try and move back into a more traditional model.
And do you think that will be for all types of roles and all types of industries? So we certainly know that those people working to deliver customer service for banks, you know, absolutely they need to be back in a very secure environment. But people that have, you know, consulting roles or, you know, providing technology solutions that is you know, customer critical, shall we say, you know, are they being forced to go back into the office or requested to go back in the office?
No, I mean, I do believe even before the pandemic, there was a healthy use of remote workers, particularly in the sort of development, software development industry. And so where you have outsourcing providers who have services involving software development, software architecture, there is more of a traditional view in that industry that actually they can use remote workers. So I think that will continue. I guess the question is, you know, you gave the example of customer services for banking clients. It makes a lot of sense for those types of agents to be working in a fixed location. But, you know, there is an opportunity for the outsourcing industry to have some long-term benefits arising out of the pandemic. You know, one of the things that they could potentially benefit from is the ability to have a hybrid workforce, is the ability to go into locations that they don't currently operate within to access talent. And we all know that there is a big crunch on talent, and to access locations where maybe inflation is not as high, right? But those are the opportunities. There's also significant challenges in doing that. There is a data security challenge that we talked about. One can set up their applications and the way in which data can be accessed in a way which is secure. But what you can't control is the physical environment in which people work if they're not doing it in one of your delivery centers. So that risk will remain. There are various ways in which you can try and mitigate that risk by carrying out some form of monitoring on staff. But you can't get into the sort of big brother way of doing things, because actually in many countries that's just not allowed, right? So that is one challenge. The other challenge is tax. If you set up a virtual organization in a country, from a corporate tax perspective, you might be deemed to have created a permanent establishment there. From an employer perspective as well, if you have workforce who are being employed by you virtually in specific countries that you don't currently have an establishment in, then essentially you will be employing employees in that country, and you'll be having to pay them payroll tax. You'll be having to pay their payroll taxes, and you'll be subject to the employment rights that are available to those employees in that country. So the sort of universal sort of dream of being able to employ anyone anywhere is just not possible. However, what I'm saying is that there is an opportunity to be able to look at specific locations where you may not have a fixed delivery center, but where you believe there is a lot of talent, latent talent, which you can employ on a sort of remote basis to support your clients.
Right, so this is one major subject that we've been pushing at the GSA, and that is open talent. And we've been saying that the access to open talent is probably the biggest game changer the outsourcing industry has seen since the advent of offshoring. But you're saying, well, you've got to be really quite careful here. It's not as easy as just accessing any talent. Are there specific locations that organizations can't really go to, or are there specific destinations that you'd say, you know, this is a real hotbed for open talent and you can do it, you know?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think the way I foresee it working is organizations will be a little bit more opportunistic about how they do this. So, for example, you know, certain countries have very strict labor laws, right? And if you don't operate in that country, you don't know what they are. So if you employ people in those countries, then you'll be automatically subject to those labor laws, right? Certain countries have also very high rates of corporation tax. So if you operate in those countries and you are deemed to have developed a permanent establishment, then the profits of that company, or the deemed profits, will be subject to that tax. So I think the way to do this is to look at, you know, a sort of, you know, we can call it a hub and spoke model, right? These organizations will have delivery centers in different regions. You know, they'll have nearshore, they'll have offshore India, they'll have LATAM locations. Those could be the hubs. And then you look at countries that you don't currently have delivery locations in, but where you believe there is talent that's accessible, where you believe that accessing that talent will allow you to achieve certain social objectives that you as a company want to try and reach around sustainability. Where, for example, the turnover rates of staff are not as high as in your current delivery locations, because we all know there's a point where there's a saturation and then staff turnover, and they move to competitors in the same areas potentially. So you look at those different factors. You have a matrix of factors that you look at, and then you choose where your spoke countries will be. And you choose those in a fairly strategic way, because in those spoke countries, you'll be employing staff who will be able to claim employment rights in those countries. You'll be having to pay payroll taxes in those countries, and you'll have to pay some form of corporate tax as well. So you need to be quite strategic about which countries you choose, and you'll need to develop some form of organization on the ground to be able to employ these staff. But the you know, I guess the benefit is you don't have to develop an entire delivery center infrastructure, which is costly and requires investment, etc.
So that's quite this brings us on to another area which I think is really quite interesting, and that is the cost change and shift of a working from home model. What have you actually seen there? I mean, have we seen a reduction in real estate usage? And if we have, you know, are employees being paid for working from home? I mean, obviously they're saving the money from travel, but the fuel bills are going through the roof. You know, what are you seeing about the payments piece
side of things? Well, look, the sort of evidence that I have is quite anecdotal. My understanding is that because the way in which clients have constructed their contracts with the outsourcing industry, you would need to change that contract before you can basically let go of your delivery locations. So there isn't necessarily a rental saving from these real estate assets, which again means that there is a sort of footprint, a carbon footprint of those buildings. Now, obviously, if those buildings aren't operating, then you save on some of the, the running costs of those buildings. Staff are working from home. In those countries, inflation continues to, be quite high in certain countries. But the model in the industry is for providers to be able to pass over to their clients the cost of inflation, which they then feed into their salaries that they pay their workforce. So from that perspective, I think it's being dealt with. But I haven't seen yet a big reduction in real estate footprint from the industry, and that's partly because there isn't quite yet, one or two providers who have developed a solution that can deal with the challenges of a remote workforce, but can still meet their clients' requirements. But that solution should be looked at and should be coming, because this hopefully will be seen by many people as being, a good, positive way forward for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to ask you that, there's huge opportunity for new challenges to now start up with a completely different delivery model. Have you seen many examples of these new exciting companies coming already, or not yet?
Yeah, no. So, for example, one could call them part of the outsourcing industry, but another way to look at them is sort of global employment companies. So there are companies that have set themselves up who essentially employ resources in various different locations, and then they make those resources available to their clients, right? And that is a model that the outsourcing industry could consider as well. So essentially, the risk of all of the challenges that we talked about, well, the risk of some of those challenges are dealt with by that one entity that employs all these people. And they're just provided to you as a sort of person shopping, service where you can employ these people. So that is one potential alternative. I don't think it's that relevant for the outsourcing industry. I don't think it will be that helpful, because there's a margin that needs to be paid to this company, these companies that operate and employ these people. So, the outsourcing suppliers will essentially be having to pay that margin through to a third party. The staff aren't their permanent staff. The employing company is still the employer of record. And so when you're trying to build a sort of 3 or 5 year virtual delivery solution for a client, where you're trying to continually improve your performance against KPIs, achieve cost savings, having a virtual workforce that's not even your employees is, I think, quite difficult to be able to achieve in those environments. So, but that is one solution. Another solution, we were talking about open talent. One solution that's used in various industries, including, for example, the mining industry, where they have people who work on projects and have to go around the world working on different projects, is to set up what's called a global employment business, right? Which will essentially employ these staff members, regardless of which country they're operating in. And the reason for that is because they need to operate in a country for 6 months and then they move to another country for 6 months, right? And that global employment company can deal with all of the, the tax, the payroll issues. Now, that's a very expensive type of organization to set up, because it needs to be able to essentially achieve compliance at a global scale. But that is another model that could be looked at, particularly when you talk about open talent. That's a model that is able to access talent from whichever country they may be operating in. But it doesn't deal with the challenges that we discussed around security. Clients will still have that as a challenge. In one way, clients may welcome it, because it allows clients also to burnish their sort of social and sustainability credentials by being able to access talent in countries that were, hitherto not necessarily seen as being providers to the outsourcing industry. But from a data security perspective, that challenge still remains.
So one of the stats that we published, it's not our own stat, I think, can't remember the source actually, but I think the stat was that 43% of enterprise buyers are concerned that their service providers are ready to deliver their projects that they need to deliver. Would you agree with that? And what should we as an industry do about it?
So I would suspect there is a sort of talent shortage in certain parts of the industry, particularly technology development skills, technology architecture skills, those areas, and also in newer areas like public cloud infrastructure, which are newer areas, and so there's less engineers available to support clients. And certainly in those areas that will be an issue. But in other areas, more sort of business process orientated areas, I don't see that as being a concern because clients agree long-term contracts with their suppliers, and they expect them to be able to deliver according to the requirements, regardless of the volumes. There tend to be certain parameters within which volumes can move in these contracts. So I don't see that as being an issue in that segment. But certainly in technology development, yes, there is a talent crisis, or talent shortage. And I suspect clients are having that concern.
Yeah. And this is obviously where the global market comes into play to actually alleviate those challenges. Okay, yes. So final words from you, Usman. What else do you see changing? Any other challenges do you see coming towards the outsourcing industry that we should be mindful of?
So one of the areas that I did want to talk about was assurance, and the way in which the outsourcing industry and the certifications that they hold, which clients look for. So I'm talking about things like ISO 27001, suppliers who are listed on the US stock exchange having to do SOX controls, compliance, etc. Those sorts of certifications need to be looked at in the context of the discussion that we've just had, which is around accessing global talents. So the question is, can you still maintain your certification even though you may have a hybrid workforce? I think the answer broadly should be yes. There are certain physical control environments that won't be available because people are working from home. But otherwise, from a security, a data, an access control, and a data security perspective, the industry should be able to continue to meet those requirements. But it will take some working through if the industry want to move to a hybrid workforce model.
And is that an area you're consulting on a lot? Because a lot of your customers are looking at this issue right now.
Yes, we do a lot of ISO certification work, as well as SOX controls and compliance. And in an environment that's changing, those things need to be relooked at. So we've done that work, and broadly speaking, as I said, certain controls can still be maintained, but the physical control area is one that needs to be worked through.
Yeah, and just a final question, it's a bit of an offside question for me, is sustainability agenda. How well do you think service providers are moving to work towards net zero and be more sustainable?
Yeah, so Kerry, I think it's key for the industry because their clients will be pushing them towards this. But also as the industry continues to evolve, net zero targets are essential for the industry. It will be a bit like a security certification. Clients will want to know that outsourcing providers have sustainability or ESG at their core, because that's one of the values that those clients are projecting in the market. So it will be important, and we're already seeing some contractual language included around commitments to those. Right now, I would say they're not very precise, but as all industries move towards net zero and sustainability, those requirements will get more and more precise and onerous.
Yeah, we're certainly sort of like pushing at the GSA for us to look not just at the environmental factors of ESG, but much more on the social elements, because we're a people industry. We believe there should be different metrics which are people focused, which would be more around inclusion and diversity in your supply chain, corporate social responsibility, impact sourcing, things like that need to be brought into it for our industry. So yeah, lots of change there.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of good stuff going on. Again, the S in ESG is very important for investors as well. The big pension funds that invest in different companies look at these things. So it is key. That's an important piece. It is a people industry, and people need to be treated, well, respectfully. All of their employment rights should be honoured. and they should be entitled to a sort of a quality of life that we would be happy with.
No, so I think the government's done well in driving the SBs with the Social Value Act, and obviously, 10% of their RFPs are now marked on social values. Are you seeing that come through in the RFPs for the private sector? Or
yes,
not?
yes, definitely. For example, most enterprise clients will have a vision or a policy in respect of this area, and that vision will be part of an RFP process, particularly where they're engaging a third party who will have a large workforce working on behalf of that client. So it is coming through both in scoring criteria, but also in contractual compliance requirements. And it's something that will continue to, feed through, because, just because you have a workforce that may not be yours doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated well. And that's the approach that enterprise customers are taking. These are third-party workforce employees, but they're working on behalf of those clients, so they should be treated in a similar way.
Oh, brings a song to mind. People are people. So thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a fascinating conversation. And your final words are you hugely optimistic about the future of the industry, or have you got some words of caution?
I'm generally an optimistic person, so I will remain optimistic. And we've been through ups and downs during the pandemic, but I think the industry is very resilient. They are staffed with large organizations, and I'm sure they will continue to find ways to deliver solutions to their clients.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kerry. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.